What's going on, guys? Wick here. So this video is probably long overdue. I want to make a video to go over the confirmation suite, specifically the Wick RSI and the Wick thrust. Okay, and I'd like to show you guys the value in it and show you how I use these indicators. I would like to add, guys, that both the Wick thrust and the Wick RSI will work equally the same across all different time frames. So no matter whether you're using the high time frame indicator suites and you're trading the dailies and the weeklies, or if you're trading the lower time frames and you're using the low time frame indicator suite with the 5-minute and the 15-minute charts, these will both act just the same on those time frames. So first thing you might notice about the Wick RSI is it does have 3 lines instead of the normal 1 line. And that's because I created a slow, medium, and fast line so that you can take either a early signal, you can take the normal signal, or you can take the later, more confirmed signal. The way that I personally use this, though, is I look at the orange line, and if the orange line crosses below the other 2 lines, and it stays there for a longer period of time, I view this as a sign of weakness, especially the longer it stays at the bottom, okay? And then conversely, when it goes above the other 2 lines, I view this as a sign of strength, especially the longer it stays above the other 2 lines, okay? Now, the most value in the RSI actually comes from how we've personally calculated the bearish and the bullish divergences. These are so good, guys, that you could even use them as standalone indicators. The only reason why I did not do that is because the Wick breakout is so amazing, right? It's so good. So I use this as confirmation and it works phenomenally. Let me show you. First, let's go over standalone, okay? So I can show you the actual value of the indicator itself. So here you have a bearish divergence that printed right there. If you follow that up to the price action, that's the very top before we had the huge crash, guys, all the way down to $3,800. This was the largest crash Bitcoin had in many, many years. And if you would have just followed this indicator, you would have either gotten out of your long positions and saved a bunch of Bitcoin that you lost, or you might have even taken a short and, made a lot more Bitcoin. But then you think to yourself, well, maybe this was a fluke. Well, let's look at the next sign. The next sign was a bullish divergence. And as you can see, guys, this printed right here, which was at $5,000. Imagine being in at $5,000 and even going to $8,000. You would most likely hold that and not even set a stop after that. That was too close. And you'd probably still be holding it at $14,000, which is almost 3x, guys. So let's look at the next divergence. The next divergence is a bearish divergence, and it printed right there. And you can see this wasn't a large move when you look at the whole magnitude of this chart, but let's actually calculate it. Here was the actual signal right at 7,450. We did have downside action, and it printed a low days later from 7,400 at 6,400. That's a 1,000-point move scalp that you have there from that divergence. Next, let's look at the next bearish divergence. And I would say out of all the divergences on this chart, if you have an untrained eye, you might think that this was probably the one that didn't work out. But let's analyze it a little bit more. Well, here you had a squeeze letting you know wait for a green arrow. You got your green arrow, and if you went long, you would have been heavily in profit by here, okay? And even though you had this bearish divergence, you would have got out, only for them to pump it up and dump it on you even lower. It touched the 20-day moving average, broke through it, then found it as support, and continued sideways, okay? So this was a very much valid signal to me. Next, you have this bullish divergence here. Well, you can see this really didn't do much. It kind of went sideways and didn't do anything. But shortly after, it went into a squeeze, guys. That's letting you know that there's still a lot of power here. There's still a lot of bullish belief over here. And then right afterwards, we had another bullish divergence while we're in a squeeze, guys. This should let you know that the probabilities are are high. It's high that the breakout is going to be to the upside. Okay, call this early confirmation, guys. It's actually an early confirmation. And then you're waiting for a green arrow, which printed right here, right? And then you had the move. Guys, this is what I posted on Twitter. This is how I actually got my move. So let's look again at the next one. The next one is right here. And it printed right here. And of course, you had a nice little scalp. Okay? And that was a good move. If we go on further, yeah, well, if you stayed in that move, you got into a squeeze, got into the long arrow, and well, there we are, guys. So hopefully that shows you all the value in the Wick RSI, and we can move on to the Wick thrust. Okay, guys. So the Wick thrust, probably the one that I think is you guys haven't seen the value in the most, simply because of me, because I haven't explained it. Okay, so when I look at the Wick thrust, I look at the orange bars first and foremost. That's what I'm paying attention to. Okay? And so know that when it goes past this black line, this threshold, that's when it becomes an orange line, right? It turns from a green line to an orange line as it crosses this threshold. Conversely, when it's to the downside, okay, and it crosses this threshold, it goes from being a red line, it becomes an orange line when it crosses this threshold. Okay, so know that. This is also a very powerful indicator. A lot of times you can use it as a standalone indicator too. But again, why would you when we have the wick breakout and you can use it for a higher probability move? Now, what I like to look for specifically or pay attention to if I see it happening is a bar to the upside or downside followed by the opposite direction the very next day. Just as you see right here, guys. What this tells you is that there's a change in power, a change in strength. The institutions are changing their minds, okay? It's a change of direction. So right here, you see we would have had a down yellow bar, and this was printed, again, almost at the very high before we had the crash all the way down to, 3,800. So you had that plus the RSI, letting you know to get out of here. But then the very, 2 or 3 days later, you did have a big upside bar, right? But again, the very next day, alternating directions on the next day, you had a bar to the downside. And this lets you know there's a change in power. There's a change in power, guys. Do not see this move. And look what happened. So then we have another orange bar that barely broke out from the threshold, okay? It was right there. And you can see we didn't really do much. We went up and then we went down. So yeah, sure, it could have been a little bit of a loss, I guess if you took that trade. But again, realize it was barely an orange bar. And look what happened next. We had a real big orange bar that broke way past the threshold and gave you a long signal from $6,900. At the high, it was $10,000. Okay? This was a very valuable signal. Next, we have another one that barely breaks the threshold, but it is in a squeeze, guys. Again, an early confirmation to let you know that the probabilities of a breakout to the upside are high. And then what happens? A day before the green arrow, we have another one. I mean, guys, I couldn't have made this more easy for you. If you have these two indicators, you're catching most of the moves, and the moves that you're catching make up for all your other small losses, all these other small losses where you might have taken this little, where was it? There was a long in RSI, I think right here, where it pumped and dumped, just not explain that. So hopefully you can see this. Let's go on. Let's see what happened recently, right? Because I'm not cherry picking here. This is Bitcoin. Bitcoin and a recent chart. So here we have over here first, actually, we have a move to the downside, a big yellow arrow, and it printed right on this day. Most people would think this was oversold, and they might even take a long. Well, not if you saw the wick thrust. You would have missed this whole move, not losing your Bitcoin once again. Or taking a short and making more Bitcoin. Let's look what happened next. Well, you had another wick thrust that broke the threshold, okay? And then not 1, 2, but 3 days later, you did have one to the upside, right? I view this as an alternating direction because you also have a red bar right after this one. Okay, if anything, I would have stayed out of this move maybe, okay? But then what happened? You went into another squeeze, and you would have looked at this and said, okay, well, maybe that's a sign of strength. Not too sure, right? And then you have another one to the upside while you're in a squeeze. Guys, again, right before the green arrow. And look what happened. And you're wondering how I'm catching these moves, guys. I'm giving it to you. So hopefully this explains these two indicators, my confirmation suite, how to use them. I hope you enjoyed this little lesson or presentation, guys. And I'll talk to everyone soon. Take care.